Hey there, my name is Rachel Kalaki.
I'm Annie.
And I'm Shelby. And welcome to the Magdala Podcast.
We know from experience that pornography, masturbation, and other sexual addictions are not just a guy problem.
The need for women to be accompanied in their journey toward healing from addiction has gone sorely unmet, and that's why we're here.
Magdala is a space where women can find hope, healing, and freedom from sexual addiction through support, community, and accountability.
Here on the podcast, you'll find everything from testimonies to practical advice to discussions on how to live fully as a Catholic woman.
You are not alone, and wherever you are on your journey, we welcome you to this table.
Alrighty, we are back with another episode of the Magdala Podcast. I'm Shelby, and I'm here with Rachel. Rachel, how are you doing today?
I'm good. Today, this is the second episode that I've recorded today where I am not the host.
Rachel's a trooper.
Heavy podcasting day, but also yes. I love not hosting. I realized I'm like, oh, I actually don't love hosting.
Yeah. Wait, so have you ever not hosted an episode before, like that you've been on, besides the two you did today?
Within Magdala?
Mm-hmm.
And I've hosted all of them.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a sense of relaxedness when you're not hosting, because it's just kind of like you're just there, you know, you speak when you want to, and you're just there.
Yeah, I enjoy being a guest on podcasts.
Yes.
Because, I also don't enjoy being a guest on podcasts sometimes because if you don't know the person, you're like, what are you going to ask me? So sometimes you have to communicate boundaries ahead of time, but I do like being a guest because different people bring out different angles and want to talk about different things. It's just a very cool experience when people are respectful. So
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's much better when it's just a conversation and you're confident that's a conversation instead of thinking it's an interview.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah.
No pressure.
Well, hopefully it's more of a conversation today. I feel like it will be.
Do we know each other, Shelby? Do we know each other?
Well, today we're going to talk about the feminine genius, which I had a heck of a fun time researching for.
You destroyed this outline. Yeah.
Wow, thanks. I do love a good outline. If college taught me anything, it's how to make a good outline. Yes. So we're talking about the feminine genius. When I was researching for this, I was kind of startled by the lack of information there is upfront about the true source of the feminine genius. Obviously in the Catholic space, specifically within women's ministries, it's a term that's thrown around a lot. And I know when I was learning about it in college and everything, I knew that it was a good thing. I knew that it was cool, but I don't know if I could tell you much about what it specifically was, other than just the general basis that women have specific gifts and women are cool, and they're needed in society.
Yeah, it became a buzzword. When speaking of feminine genius, you can probably hear my toddler squealing, outside my office door with her babysitter. So, she's expressive. It became a buzzword that we just kind of tossed around. Or you could just kind of stamp it on any women's program, women's book, anything. It's feminine genius. And it's okay, yes, again,
right.
What's the foundation of this phrase? What does it actually mean? I think we've impoverished the term quite a lot, actually, in kind of pop Catholic culture. I'll put it that way.
Yeah, definitely. So, like I said, I did research for this last week, and when I Googled, all I did was Google feminine genius, those two words. I Googled the buzzword, and what I got was a lot of podcasts.
Oh,
funnily enough.
Boy.
Yeah, I got a lot of podcasts. I, for some reason, got this girl who is maybe an author named Genevieve. She was at the very top of the Google search, which
good job,
I don't know why. Yeah, good job, Genevieve. Genevieve is a part of the feminine genius. It just seems like a lot of opinion pieces by, Catholic sites, good Catholic sites, trusted Catholic sites, maybe a book or two, but what I didn't get was JP2's actual document, which mentions the feminine genius.
Source documents for things? What, Shelby?
Yeah.
Are you kidding me?
So, yeah, I didn't get anything from the Vatican. I didn't get anything from the Catechism. I didn't get anything from any major authority figure in the Catholic Church whatsoever. Um, so that was interesting, but luckily I kind of knew that it was from JP2's letter to women, which he wrote in June of 1995. JP2, Pope John Paul II. I call him JP2 all the time, but Pope St. John Paul II is
Sure.
formal. He wrote that letter really just from his own heart to all the hearts of women. It's not
Right.
it's not from the chair of Peter. It's not speaking on behalf of like the church formally, but it's really him
it's a
as a
pastoral
pope.
letter. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really him as a pope, as a father, as a priest, talking directly to the heart of every woman. And that's where he mentions the feminine genius. So
And that's
basically,
that's where the term,
oh no,
he formally used the term in this, but Mulieris Dignitatem, he
yes,
discussed, I mean, he
yes,
essentially sets up the feminine genius in Mulieris Dignitatem because that came first. And then the
absolutely.
letter is where he finally used the term, right?
Yep.
Okay.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Mulieris, you say so unnaturally. It's probably your MA in theology.
That theo education, man, gotta learn Latin.
Yeah, Mulieris Dignitatem was that was an actual apostolic letter,
Right.
and it was written in 1988. He talks a lot about Mary in context of like being a model for all women, regardless of vocation, season of life, and then really reflected on the dignity of women, and all of this in the realm of being a Marian year. He was specifically honoring Mary and calling women towards their own dignity through Mary as an image of that dignity. So then this is obviously like, 7 years later. There is something like kind of happening in the world right now. There's like a conference in Europe that's talking about women and femininity and all of that stuff. And essentially, JP2 sees discord happening in terms of how women are being viewed and treated in society, how their dignity is being kind of overlooked. So he writes this letter, again, not an apostolic letter, but truly just a letter from his heart to every woman.
Yeah. It's a stunning letter for people who haven't read it. It's
It really
great.
is. Yeah. And it pairs so beautifully with Mulieris Dignitatem, like we said. So we're not going to specifically quote anything from that apostolic letter, but I encourage everyone to go read it. If you just Google it, usually I just use the Vatican like link that comes up.
See.
Yeah. Yeah. And it'll be in the show notes too on YouTube and everything.
Also wanted to add, Evangelium Vitae was written the same year as encyclical. And yeah, EV is like considered kind of his like penultimate encyclical, like if just kind of generally understood. I mean, JP2 had 14 encyclicals, I believe. Like which is a lot of encyclicals. I think Benedict had did Benedict have 3 or 4? I can't remember. I think Pope Francis only had 3. Yeah, anyway, I can't remember. All I know is JP2 had 14, which is a freaking lot of encyclicals. But EV99 particularly, that's where controversial. He talks about like a new feminism needing to be created, but he's kind of playing off of the same kind of themes in Mulieris Dignitatem and his letter to women of this transformation of culture, and the responsibility, like a beautiful responsibility placed on women for the transformation of culture. And so that's where he talks about like a new feminism kind of arising. And I don't know, it's just really beautiful. It's like it's a very emboldening kind of language that he uses for women. It's just really stunning.
Yeah, as I was reading this all the way through last week, I was messaging Rachel like all the way through it, and I was like, I'm just getting so fired up. Like,
welcome.
he just has a way of speaking so beautifully, but also speaking so simply at the same time. Like it's complex, deep truths that he's expressing, but he's doing so in a way that it truly like dives right to your heart, you know?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, that's that double doctorate. He was a philosopher and a theologian. Like he was a beast. So he has a way of expressing, yeah, very like the theological truth, but he leads you on the path to it. He philosophizes you into that theological truth. So like G.K. Chesterton talking about how like philosophy is opening the mouth, but you must eventually bite down and chew, and that's theology.
Mhm.
That's all JP2's stuff is like you open the mouth, and sometimes you're like, are we ever gonna bite down? But he always does, and it's just very powerful because it's this whole intellectual process that is very unique, I think, to
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So we're gonna like go through the document, kind of like expand how it introduces the feminine genius, what it actually talks about in terms of themes, dignity of women, vocation, all of that. That conference I was talking about, it was the fourth World Conference on Women of the United Nations. So he starts off the letter by mentioning that just a month prior, he wrote a specific letter to the Secretary General of that conference, who her name is Gertrude. I cannot pronounce her last name. It's like Magdala. I think. Yeah. But in that document, he just let her know that, you know, it seems like she has a different view of the Catholic Church's teaching on women and the dignity of women. And he kind of cleared all of that up, like, and then readdresses all of this to the women across the world. So I'm just going to read the first two lines, the first two lines of the document. I think it sets up everything so beautifully. But he says, taking up the themes I addressed in that document meaning the letter.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I would now like to speak directly to every woman to reflect with her on the problems and the prospects of what it means to be a woman in our time. In particular, I wish to consider the essential issue of the dignity and rights of women as seen in the light of the Word of God. So, as expressed through that, the first half of the letter is all about the dignity and different roles of women. He starts by thanking mothers, wives, daughters, consecrated women, and women who work specifically. He takes a different paragraph to thank every single one of these different roles that women find themselves in. And then he also expresses a deep sorrow for the grave misjustices that women have suffered over history. I mean, from the times of Christ to now being like the middle of the 90s, he says that there has been a lot of discrimination against motherhood, a lot of crimes against women, even as practical as like unequal pay and opportunity, he brings up how, women just like were given the right to vote like some 70 years before, and all of this on the hinge of them, kind of being the full bearing the full weight of bringing forth civilization, bringing forth these people. Yeah, he gets a little sassy and I kind of love it, but he's like, how are we being this mean and this unjust to women when they're the reason we're here?
Yep. I know. And he'll get more into like spiritual motherhood, especially. I mean, he gets into it in Mulieris Dignitatum that like that motherhood characteristic is primarily spiritual, even if it's never manifested biologically. But this part here, I think is so after he thinks when he's talking about the injustices that women have faced or whatever, he says, I know of course that simply saying thank you is not enough. Unfortunately, we are heirs to a history which has conditioned us to a remarkable extent, and every time and place, this conditioning has been an obstacle to the progress of women. Women's dignity has often been unacknowledged and their prerogatives misrepresented. They have often been relegated to the margins of society and even reduced to servitude. This has prevented women from truly being themselves, and it has resulted in a spiritual impoverishment of humanity. Like, slam dunk. It's like, oh.
Oh, he is just, yeah, it really is when you think about everything that he mentions, and then you start to examine, your own life of the times where, like, just even little things of people assuming that you're not, like, as educated as you are in, like, certain topics, not to not to anyone's, like, specific fault, or even
Yeah.
that they mean to do it, but it is just that conditionalization over, I mean, we're talking centuries of,
Yeah.
yeah, of conditioning.
Yeah, and I think him being willing to accept that the church has contributed, or
Yes,
members, not the church itself, but members of the church have contributed,
right.
um, that the church has not necessarily risen up against that conditioning and has often participated with it. And that's kind of his call in EV 99. That's so
Mhm.
some of what he's talking about in Letters to Women is like this injustice should embolden the church to respond differently, especially kind of amidst the culture of death.
Yeah.
So I think that's incredibly powerful. But yes.
Yeah, and it's just so healing to hear him acknowledge it too, and
Hmm.
to double down on, you know, no, this is what the church is calling for women,
Yeah.
like, this is your dignity. Which gets us to the second half of the document, which is the first time he mentions something called the feminine genius. He actually mentions it as genius of women first, and
Hmm.
then transitions into feminine genius. But he starts off the second half by diving into scripture, into the Genesis creation narrative,
Hmm.
and really emphasizing the complementarity of women and men. And that's through all aspects of philosophy, psychology,
Hmm.
mentally, spiritually, like every aspect, women and men are meant to complement each other, and they're
Yeah.
meant to do so equally.
Right.
It's not like woman was made because man needed her. It's like
Yeah.
man was created because woman needed him, and like vice versa. Like, it was
Yeah.
just, they're both equal. Just because we see the man come first doesn't mean that the woman is an afterthought.
Which was a break. It was a break from like Aristotelian philosophy, even to mystic philosophy in some regard. Like he kind of broke from that. And I mean, even in TOB, he has there's like a fascinating paragraph that isn't often discussed where um he references like the rib being taken from Adam and Adam going
Mhm.
into a deep sleep that potentially
Yeah.
Adam was essentially cast out of existence
Hmm.
and then brought back into existence as man and woman. So, and there's all this stuff in like the original Hebrew of like there's a term um that and I can't remember the Hebrew term off the top of my head, but the essentially there's like yeah, Adam is referenced as like human essentially up
Mhm.
until that moment, and then it's man and woman.
Wow.
So like the term man does not exist until woman does in some cases,
Yeah.
which is crazy. So like yeah, but that's a break. That's a break
Mhm.
from kind of like philosophical traditions is that um woman is not a secondary created being.
Mhm.
John
Mhm.
Paul was very pro like yeah, the mutuality, the complementarity, Ephesians 5 being interpreted under like the mutual submission kind of thing, which I
Mhm.
remember you and I talking a lot about that last year, because of this the submission blog war. No, it was it's just, it was wild times over at Magdala. No, but yeah, that idea of like, because I think for him Ephesians 5 was defined by, or first and foremost, like the be subordinate to one another out of reverence for Christ. And that's
Right.
kind of the human condition is men and women, like the quote unquote race to the bottom, like serving one
Mhm.
another, being Christ-like in being subordinate, out of love for Christ ultimately, and then love for each other and regard for each other. But anyway, sorry, I think that part of TOB is really cool, but it's not talked about a lot. It's like, wait, what? Anyway.
No, that is beautiful. Do you know if he did the TOB audiences before or after this letter? I feel like it was after.
Before.
Oh, it was before?
Hmm.
Was it through like the 80s or something?
Gosh, when did the audiences begin?
It was over several years. I remember that.
Yeah.
How many people know that is that TOB as a like that was his Wednesday audiences for like 2 years or something crazy.
Geese. Yeah, I think it was the 80s. I cannot remember. I think so, but
Yeah.
great question. Yeah, maybe it started. Maybe it started earlier than that, but anyway, keep going. Sorry.
Yeah. Yeah. No, you're fine. I asked the question.
The Magdala podcast is sponsored by the Catholic Theology Show, presented by Ave Maria University. The Catholic Theology Show covers themes such as the value of a Catholic higher education, religious liberty, how to pray, the philosophies of St. Thomas Aquinas, and more. Stream episodes on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, and learn more by visiting the link below.
Yeah, so like I said, he emphasizes the equality of both men and women. And he also circles back to, he's like, God didn't just ask Adam to tend the earth and to populate it. He asked both of them equally. It's a weight that is just as much on the man as it is on the woman, and vice versa. They are a pair from the start, and all of the like instructions that God gives them for mankind come to both of them equally.
Yeah, but with distinction. Like, and this is where he depends on Edith Stein a lot too. This idea of like distinction, like equality with distinction, and but also that like distinction is not identity per se. Like, I mean, it is in a way, but there's just some really fascinating things. Like, even when he talks about the feminine genius of like these attributes being specific to women, but it's not this like identifying factor. Like, I hesitate when we're talking about women to define by function, like, and when he's addressing women, when he's talking about motherhood, he's like not talking about motherhood as a function. He's talking about it as like a fundamental part of being a woman is mothering, whether you do so in a spiritual sense or a physical sense, both, whatever.
But like a disposition almost.
Right, but defining women by function of like, I mean, I hesitate sometimes in Catholic spaces where it's like, you're a nurturer, you're a caregiver, you're like, even if it's like these really honoring noble terms, it's like, okay, well, is that not a function? Like, the feminine genius goes deeper than these functions. It's like it's a very fundamental aspect of who we are. So I don't know.
Right.
Like, yeah, this is my mind. Sorry, my mind's kind of going a million places. You're like, Rachel,
externally process on all of us. Go ahead.
Bring it back. No. But Edith Stein talks about that of like there's humanity, there's gender, and then there's individuality. And sometimes individuality and the distinct call of an individual person kind of trumps the I don't want to say the nature of gender, but like the attributes of a gender. So like she talks about how yes, it is more natural for man, like at her time period, like it's more natural for man to go out and work and earn for a family. But that does not mean that women cannot or should not go out and work and earn, because the individual call of a particular person and of a particular wife, a particular mother, a particular woman may trump kind of the attributes of the gender. Like, so Jopi too kind of dependent on that too, of like feminine genius can go deeper. There's a beautiful individuality to it. There's like a standard, but there's an individuality, because even like pointing back to the Blessed Mother, it's like this, what was so unique about the Blessed Mother was her entire surrender of her person to God's purposes. That's the point. So anyway, sorry. There we go.
No, you're fine. That's really important to bring up, because God asks them both to do the same things for the earth, for civilization, but he knows that they're not going to do them in the same way. Which is why they complement each other. It's like if if man was going to do the same exact things as woman and vice versa, then it wouldn't be complicated. Like it wouldn't be a compliment. It would be like they get at on.
Yeah.
Honestly, yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, so after like describing all of this, the creation narrative, this is when he first mentions the genius of women. And he says, much more important is the social and ethical dimension, which deals with human relations and spiritual values. In this area, which often develops in an inconspicuous way, beginning with the daily relationships between people, especially within the family, society certainly owes much to the genius of women. So this is when he really goes into the specific term of feminine genius as it relates to, the dignity of women and the specific call that God made women for a reason, and those specific gifts and the specific graces that he gives to women are meant to be shared in service to society, to the church, to our families, to our loved ones.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's so many ways to serve,
Yes,
There's
exactly.
so many ways, so many invitations. Like I'm even thinking of she'd laugh if she's listening to this, but my first job out of grad school was in catechesis for the Diocese of Nashville. And my boss, she's actually done a podcast episode on this podcast. My boss, Joan, was like, oh my goodness, just to me embodied so many qualities or just like an expression of the feminine genius in church leadership. Like she's head of an entire like diocesan office. She was unmarried at the time, but just like gave herself so fully in this job to me as an employee, and we're still friends. But to the people we were serving, but also just to community. Like she had such a vibrant community life and like friends. And just yeah, and I know she had plenty of personal sufferings and difficulties, but to me, even seeing somebody who was not a mother in a biological sense, not married, um, she just embodied, I think, so many. Yeah, just a really beautiful expression of the feminine genius because it was that complete donation of self to whatever God had in front of her. And it was just that was really inspiring to get to see kind of in my first job in the church. It was very inspiring. I'm just thinking
That's awesome. Yeah, praise God for her.
Yeah. Hi, Joni.
Still listening. But yeah, so JP2 uses this opportunity to call everyone specifically to the feminine genius, even if, and I'm honestly like as it should be represented in different ways, and that's not just different ways from person to person. That's different ways as society develops and continues to grow. But he calls everyone specifically, saying, it is thus my hope, dear sisters, that you will reflect carefully on what it means to speak the genius of women, not only in order to be able to see in this phase a specific part of God's plan which needs to be accepted and appreciated, but also in order to let this genius be more fully expressed in the life of society as a whole, as well as in the life of the church. And the main model of this being, once again, Mary. He says that she should be a constant source of inspiration for living out the feminine genius and what it means. He calls to mind the Annunciation and her Magnificat and how she called herself the handmaid of the Lord. And like Rachel said earlier, it was really through her effortless obedience to the will of God. And JB2 describes that as a service of love, like she fully gave everything she had to the will of God,
right,
out of love of God and out of love of everyone around her.
Yeah. Just because when we're thinking about the feminine genius or that complete donation of self and woman's particular like proclivity for that donation of self to the order of love, like we can think about it and get kind of stressed of like like how do you how do you know God's will? How do you understand that invitation to obedience? How does that not become something where you're dominated incorrectly, or like how do you surrender and trust basically of God's care, God's accompaniment of you as you do his will, that you're doing it in the right place, whatever. We can get kind of caught up in these anxieties. Anyway, Edith Stein has this quote that I just love in one of her essays on woman. She says, "Only those who surrender themselves completely into the Lord's hand can trust that they will avoid disaster. Whatever is surrendered to him is not lost, but is saved, chastened, exalted, and proportioned out in true measure." I know. So he kind of illustrates that idea too of, yeah, we can only discover where that genius is meant to be lived out, what it looks like for us, like as individuals, where that obedience is, like truly only in that interpersonal relationship with Jesus Christ. Like he's the only one who can make the feminine genius actually flourish to its fullest extent. How that looks for every person or every woman is like just so unique to her. And I think John Paul is also so excellent at inviting women into that of like where are you called to this obedience, because obedience isn't this like hammer that's just kind of bludgeoning you into this specific box. I think that's actually like one of the things he calls out in past societies is that it kind of has been used as that like bludgeon, and let's just shape women into the box that we want, rather than God has um, very specific intentions for women, yes, but he also has very specific intentions for each woman and her flourishing. So there's that general flourishing of women in the feminine genius, but there's also that individual genius that he wants to bring out through his will.
Exactly. Yeah, and he even points out that like Mary had this complete service of love, and it's only through this service of love that we get to see her reign as Queen of Heaven and Earth. He's like, it's through this service that her vocation, her ultimate vocation, the vocation that she has in heaven, is revealed. And he is like, through our own service of love, through loving those around us, through our own gifts, our own unique femininity that Christ gave us and that he calls us to express, it's through this own service that we find the quote reign of our own vocation.
Yep.
Yeah, and it's beautiful. And before we get like too into that, I do love he has a section on specifically women in the church. And I think it's so important because I have spoken to a lot of non-Catholic Christians who feel very hurt by the way that like the people in the church have expressed views towards women and almost feel isolated because they see like only men can be priests, and like are like they see men in this what looks like an authority role and think like, oh, the women are just supposed to like sit and listen and not do anything active in the mass or within the church. But he addresses this specifically and says that what may come off as authority isn't authority. It's actually just like sacramental unity, and women have a sacramental place in the Catholic Church that weighs just as much as what men are called to.
Right. Or what purpose is authority for? Like Hans von Balthasar talks about how yes, we are in a patriarchal church. Like that is the setup, that's the way it is. And we can either like leave it there, or you can see like his kind of, he was talking about priests, bishops, cardinals, the Pope himself. They have a responsibility, if we are in a patriarchal church, for he talks about like honoring and revering the feminine dimension of the church. Yeah, like prioritizing it, honoring it. Like Balthasar was like, the Marian dimension of the church is the church. Like the church is feminine. So this idea of like a patriarchal church isn't there to make it male centric. It's there to complement the already feminine dimension of the church itself.
Right.
And those things have to go in tandem and serve one another. And yeah, and then that's where the flourishing can happen, is if we love and honor and revere that distinction, and yeah, it's fascinating.
Yeah, yeah, you have the church as the bride and then Christ as the bridegroom,
Mhm.
um, reflecting that union from, back to the creation narrative of Adam and Eve.
Right.
But yeah, he says this.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, you're good. He says this beautifully, which I'm not going to read the whole paragraph that talks about this, but he says it on the heels of, like
Mhm.
seeing quote unquote authority within the church and thinking that it is more geared towards elevating the man and not
Yeah,
like man and woman
control, yeah.
together. Yes.
Yeah.
Um, and he says, by the church's constant tradition, entrusted only to men to the task of being, shepherd and bridegroom. He says, quote, this is in no way detracts from the role of women, or for that matter, from the role of the other members of the church who are not ordained to the
Yeah.
sacred ministry, since all share equally in the dignity proper to the quote, common priesthood based on baptism.
Yep.
So yeah, it's like if if that were true, then it would completely dismiss all lay people too and be like,
Mhm.
like it's not like the priests and um the consecrated are the only ones who can give towards the church and who have a place in the church. It's God has a place for everyone within
Mhm.
the church proper, and every single person is called to the same vocation of heaven.
Yeah. Yeah. And you can see, even thinking about the ministerial priesthood,
Mhm.
I was just thinking too, like when we were talking about, um, yeah, just feminine nature of the church, you can really tell when a priest uh learns from women, you know? Like
Yeah.
I think actually you and I were in this talk together
Mhm.
at the retreat last year that we went
Mhm.
to of just the priest who gave the TOB talk actually, and it was very, very
Yes.
good.
It
Good
was
job, that
so
priest.
good.
Um,
Cool.
I'm usually very skeptical of TOB talks. I'm like, this isn't gonna be real. And then he like blew it out of the water. It was amazing. Um,
Oh.
but you can tell when a priest like really reveres women and learns
Mhm.
from them and
Mhm.
sees like C.S. Lewis has this quote of like in That Hideous Strength of how like um there is a reality, like there is a person so masculine that all become feminine before him. Like that's
Mm.
what he says about Christ, is that like there is a person so masculine that all become feminine before him. And there's some interesting like things to say in there of like,
Mhm.
well, God also has like quote unquote feminine quality. You know, like we can't have a good quality that God does not have, right? But like,
Right.
but this idea of like men, even men in the ministerial priesthood, are called to in a way live out the posture of surrender that women
Mhm.
more naturally have that tendency towards. Like the feminine
Right.
genius is meant to inform the masculine genius as well. And there are parts of the
Mhm.
masculine genius that are meant to inform and teach women about themselves. Like that's the ideal, is that men and women in virtue ultimately just like create this like virtuous humanity,
Right.
um where each is informed by the other and taught by the other and like revered in their distinction by the other. um, and I mean, that's kind of what he's talking about with the common priesthood too, is like the priest, prophet, king, that dignity belongs to all of us and
Yeah.
called to make that, yeah, thrive in virtue.
Yeah, and it's all based on service and surrender too. It's like
Mhm.
men are called to surrender themselves just as much as women are, but in like fundamentally different ways, which again
Mhm.
brings to that complementarity of um yeah, like women could not give of themselves in the same way if
Right.
it weren't for men, and men could not give of themselves. um and that also just it brings us closer to Christ too, because through that surrendering we reach humility and we're grounded and we're able um to take away our own pride and our own distractions of the world and just like
Yep.
elevate each other higher.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So he I'm going to read the closing paragraph to this document, because I truly think that like his if you pull anything from this, just go read the document. Go read the letter to women. Go read Mulieris Dignitatem. Go read JP2 in general, because we cannot say anything that is going to be
I
better
know
than
we're like wrapping up, and I'm like, did we even get into it?
yeah. So I'm gonna read, the paragraph that he ends on, and let that be your entryway into diving deeper into JP2's works.
Mm.
Um, and then we'll of course have closing thoughts after. All right. Necessary emphasis should be placed on the genius of women, not only by considering great and famous women of the past or present, but also those ordinary women who reveal the gift of their womanhood by placing themselves at the service of others in their everyday lives. For in giving themselves to others each day, women fulfill their deepest vocation. Perhaps more than men, women acknowledge the person because they see persons with their hearts. They see them independently of various ideological or political systems. They see others in their greatness and limitations. They try to go out to them and help them. In this way, the basic plan of the Creator takes flesh in the history of humanity, and there is constantly revealed in the variety of vocations that beauty, not merely physical, but above all spiritual, which God bestows from the very beginning on all, and in a particular way on women.
Boom.
Yeah. Mic drop.
Slam dunk. Yeah. For in giving themselves to to others each day, women fulfill their deepest vocation.
Yeah. It's just, it's gorgeous.
Yeah.
And there were other quotes that I sent Rachel too while I was reading it that just got me fired up. But it really is just a beautiful document. And if you're ever unsure of the church's love for your feminine heart, JP2's letter to women and Mulier's Dignitatem is a good place to start.
Yeah. I had a friend who she texted me, and she was trying to distance from like particular types of music or whatever. She was trying to listen to things that were more wholesome while she was exercising, and she texted me, she's like, I just found an audio version of JP2's letter to women, and I'm listening to it while I run. And I was like, you know what? That's a great yes. That
would get me hyped up.
That works. Do it. But yeah, I love that parameter of deepest vocation. The feminine genius is in giving yourself and loving service to others. And that has again, there's such dynamism to that. There's like such unique invitations in that that are so personal to each person and what's right in front of them. But gosh, yeah. It's great.
Yeah, and then to hear that line where in the beginning he was thanking every single specific different role that women can have. It's so clear that God calls each of us to this type of service, which first is modeled after Mary, but can be shown in virtually every like virtue field way that we can live our life for the kingdom.
Yep. Absolutely.
So good. Do you have any other closing thoughts for us, Rachel? Any wisdom you want to?
Oh gosh, no. No wisdom, just hope, Yeah, I enjoyed this because I think, we talk about obviously recovery, sexuality, all these dimensions so often, but I guess for our listeners who come to Magdala, to process their sexual stories, to seek freedom from sexual compulsion, I would just say like the feminine genius is an invitation. And like sexual sin opposes that invitation. Obviously, that's why we feel so disjointed with it, is because it is not a gift of self. But maybe just examining, within your behavior, within your recovery story, like, where have you been called to give yourself right now? And that giving yourself there more can only benefit your healing. Like giving yourself in love, in obedience to God and what He has right in front of you. That's a huge part of our healing. Huge part of our healing.
Yeah. And I think I was just reminded of this, but we do like, if you've ever been in a small group, you know that we do check-ins at the beginning of every meeting, but the 2 check-ins that we do are how have you loved someone well and how have you felt
Been
loved.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's all out of service for service.
And reception of gift is a gift too. Reception of service from others is service. Yeah. It's all part of the reciprocity.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And he doesn't mention anything in this document about struggling with sin or struggling with addiction or, anything that can take away your dignity, because nothing can.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, we're going to wrap it up here, but this is great. Go read. Go read.
Go read, and we'll catch you soon on the Magdala podcast.
Yes. Thanks for joining us. Thank you, Rachel.
Thank you, Shelby.
Thanks for listening. Check out more podcast episodes, blog posts, and how to get involved with Magdala by visiting our website, magdalaministries.org. Your love is meant to change the world. We hope to see you soon.